10-Minute Philosophy. From Buddhism to Stoicism, Confucius and Aristotle, bite-sized wisdom from some of history's greatest thinkers. Written by Patrick King, narrated by Russell Newton. Despite the name, Stoicism is not a life philosophy about ignoring your emotions and keeping up the appearance of being unaffected in the face of hardship. The Stoics are often construed as cold, stone-like figures, but this is a misconception. In actuality, the Stoics had the full range of emotion that we all do, but they chose to focus on positive ones and let negative ones run their course. The basic aim of Stoicism is to live in accordance with the flow of nature. Nature is unstoppable as well as unpredictable. We can't predict the future, and we can't prepare for every foreseeable outcome. Yet, we must adapt and react to whatever comes our way somehow. We must still persist. We must thrive, even in the face of hardship. How is that possible? Most of the Western world in antiquity once was ruled by a Stoic, the eponymous Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome from 161 to 180 AD, who is often referred to as the philosopher king for his writings. Most of our conception of modern Stoicism comes from his diary, later turned into a book, Meditations. Stoicism is not a religion, though at times it bears striking resemblances to some, Taoism, for instance, which you'll read about next. But that's only because the end goals are the same, and, as it turns out, there are only so many ways to peace, fulfillment, and harmony. Stoicism, however, is a direct system of thoughts for living better. That's the sole purpose, and it's unencumbered by having to pay tribute to a deity or set of spiritual beliefs. Stoicism is a way of living that places your fate into your own two hands. Above all, Stoicism teaches the path of mental control to living a good life. Perhaps, ironically, this is done in large part by recognizing that we have control over very little in our lives, except for our thoughts themselves. When we let go of the fantasy that we can control life, we can better deal with whatever comes our way. Stoicism, as you might guess with the reference to Marcus Aurelius, was born in ancient Greece. The term Stoic comes from the Greek word stoa poikile, or painted porch, which refers to the public space in Athens where teachers and students regularly met and pontificated on life. The stoa was, in many ways, the center of Greek life. In the midst of this intellectual outburst, sometime around 300 BC, the man now considered the father of Stoicism first made a name for himself. This was Zeno. Zeno's philosophy can be described simply enough. Happiness comes as a result of living in accordance with nature's flow. From Zeno's origination of Stoicism, the next notable Stoic was Epictetus, who's credited with the wisdom behind the Enchiridion, a handbook of thoughts on Stoicism. It begins in a compelling manner. Some things are in our control and others not. Accepting that truth launches you on the way to being a Stoic. Epictetus is where things really started to take on the modern form we know today. He went on to state, "There's only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will." Among the most fundamental tenets of Stoicism is the idea that we should attempt to control our lives. Investing emotional energy into things we cannot change or control, similar to Buddhism's avoidance of attachment, is what causes unhappiness, not the actual negative event or outcome itself. He believed that focusing on things you can influence, your actions, responses, words, thoughts, and emotions, eventually, were the real keys to happiness and fulfillment. We cannot change what happens to us, but we can change how we view them. Epictetus spent his childhood as a Roman slave, and he lived most of his life on essentially one leg. He may have had a unique view on what it was to persevere and weather the storm of misfortune and still come out with a bright view of life. Along the way in Stoic history, we also meet Seneca, whose personal letters remain instructive to this day. Finally, we shift to Marcus Aurelius, the renowned philosopher king himself. This is his life philosophy in a nutshell. Everything that happens is either endurable or not. If it's endurable, then endure it, Stop complaining. If it's unendurable, then stop complaining. Your destruction will mean its end as well. Just remember, you can endure anything your mind can make endurable by treating it as in your interest to do so, in your interest or in your nature. Aurelius saw life as a giant neutral. Events will occur, happy and sad, but in reality, all events become how we choose to feel about them. Emotions, which ultimately determine our mood and satisfaction, come entirely from within and are a matter of our choosing. We only suffer as much as we allow ourselves to. Accepting all of the above, much of Stoic philosophy then is about how to train ourselves to detach from our negative emotions and deal with the uncertainty of a lack of control. This is mentioned in the first of the 3 Stoic disciplines. The 3 Stoic disciplines. The principles upon which Stoicism was founded have shifted dramatically due to different schools of thought and a gap of centuries between the most prominent practitioners and the founder, Zeno. Originally, Stoicism placed emphasis on the principles of ethics, physics, and logic, but today's understanding of Stoicism focuses more on Epictetus's 3 principles. The discipline of desire, which has to do with acceptance of our fate. The discipline of action, which has to do with philanthropy or love of mankind. The discipline of assent, which has to do with mindfulness of our judgments. Marcus Aurelius was taught by philosophers who possibly studied with Epictetus, though he never met him himself. One of the emperor's teachers introduced him to Epictetus's writings, and from that point, he was powerfully influenced by Epictetus. He also makes extensive mention of the 3 disciplines, which are important to understand what informs his own writings. 1. The discipline of desire. This entails having an attitude of acceptance toward what comes our way. In a sense, it is similar to fatalism and being resigned to the gates. What happens is necessary for your growth and will help you in the long run. Today we call the goal of this discipline amor fati, or the loving acceptance of one's fate. This discipline is summed up in a passage from the Enchiridion. Seek not for events to happen as you wish, but wish events to happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly and serenely. But Stoics are not passive doormats with no ambitions and who allow life to happen to them. They simply accept what comes and think ahead to the next step in the best way possible. For instance, Marcus Aurelius, despite a devastating plague and countless misfortunes beyond his control, led his weakened army repeatedly into battle to defend Rome against invading barbarian hordes. He prevailed despite the many obstacles to victory. If he'd failed, Rome would have been destroyed. As we'll see, the discipline of action explains this strange paradox. How can the Stoics combine acceptance with such famous endurance and courageous action? In amor fati, you must embrace everything that has happened to you, as well as what will happen in the future. All events leading up to this moment were necessary precursors to the exact world you're standing in. Suppose something happened we wish had not. Which is easier to change, our opinion and level of emotional impact, or the event itself? The answer is obvious. The event lies in the past and cannot be changed. No matter how much you prepared, it still happened. But the way you view it can easily change. We do this by embracing amor fati. Stop fighting what reality is, rather than resisting based on fantasy, that which did not happen. That's what happens when we can only, and sometimes even barely, control our actions in a volatile and unpredictable world. The Stoics use the metaphor of a dog leashed to a moving cart. The dog can walk along with the cart despite having no control and still enjoy his walk and surroundings, or he can resist the cart with all of his might and be dragged for miles. It's our choice every single day whether we choose to be the dog that accepts his fate or be dragged. If we're dragged, we end up in the same destination, but have a dramatically poorer experience. If we can simply walk with the cart, we'll be able to find the positive in that path. 2. The discipline of action. The discipline of action is living in harmony with the community of all mankind, which means benevolently wishing all of mankind to flourish and achieve happiness. No matter how malicious or deceptive they may be toward you, you must turn the other cheek, remain unaffected, and wish them well. We cannot control others, but we are always in control of our own actions and responses. We always have the choice to act virtuously to help others reach happiness. It is similar to amor fati because our most frequent sources of unhappiness and tension will most likely be other people, yet we have to embrace their actions and words. If someone is angry, we do not need to react in kind with anger or feel offended. We can choose to accept their anger, let it not impact us, and be reminded that it is meant to be instructive to our own happiness. In other words, Stoics do their best to act with virtue while accepting the actions of others in a somewhat detached manner, whether pleasant or not. We should not let mere words hold such power over us. 3. The Discipline of Ascent. The discipline of assent involves paying attention to our inner workings. We must be mindful enough to know what we are thinking. This is key to controlling your thoughts and emotions. There must be a measure of objectivity. Otherwise, you're lying to yourself and being overly impacted by your emotions. Stoics are primarily interested in monitoring their judgments of good and bad. These simple judgments have the ability to influence our entire worldview. We may realize that we are viewing external events and the actions of people as negative or bad, but this is to ignore the fact that they are negative purely because we label them as such. This is unnecessary. Recall that emotions are a purely internal creation. The discipline of assent is the practice of catching yourself in this act of creating negative narratives around your life and quite literally changing your worldview. In fact, nothing needs to be bad, negative, or unfortunate. This is a choice of judgment and labeling. Not everything needs to be transformed into a positive that makes you sing, yet certainly nothing needs to have the power to ruin your day. So, what do we get when we combine these 3 Stoic disciplines of acceptance, philanthropy, and mindfulness? We create a life philosophy that preaches introspection and self-awareness to remain calm and rational, no matter the circumstances, even to those who would seek to maliciously hurt you. Focus only on what you can control, your emotions and actions, and let everything else play out as it will. This is a recipe for moving through life by rolling with the punches and coming back even stronger. Turning the obstacle upside down. If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it, and it is in your power to wipe out this judgment now. Marcus Aurelius. The key to Stoicism is plain and simple perception. Consider that 2 people can view a horrific car accident in different ways. One person can see it as a chance for a new car, while the other might only focus on the damage itself and assignment of guilt. Perception is how we decide what events mean to us. Our perceptions can be like a lead ball chained to our feet, holding us back and making us weak, or they can be a great source of strength, like a magical elixir. How we see the world around us and how we interpret what happens to us makes a massive difference in how we get to live our lives. What we already learned from the Stoics is that they see external events not as good or bad, but as indifferent. So it's not these events, because they are ultimately indifferent, but your own judgment of these events that matters. This makes you responsible for your life. You don't control external events, but you control how you choose to look at them and then respond to them. And in the end, that's all that matters. As the famous Stoic turn of phrase says, you can turn an obstacle upside down. This means to look at even a negative occurrence as something that will ultimately benefit you later on or as a learning moment. We are disturbed or delighted not by events, but only by our judgment and perception of those events. What the Stoics tried to do was not get carried away by their initial impression about external events. Something happens when we automatically get an impression about it. We can't do much about that. This is our emotional reaction. but it does not have to be our overall response. So look at what happens objectively and dispassionately. It might be raining, and then choose your best reaction. The world won't end, and the activities you had planned for outdoors can be done another day. How might the rain force you to get creative or explore other untapped potential? What are the alternate perspectives you can adopt rather than one of sadness or frustration? These alternate perspectives always exist, and you should train your ability to see them. The truth is that you always have the ability to respond in a way that amounts to rolling with the punches. How might this obstacle become an opportunity, if only an opportunity to practice your sense of resiliency and patience? Training non-reaction. It's not so simple as flipping a switch to turn the obstacle upside down and realize that your emotions are coming from entirely within you and under your control. To be frank, most of our lives are too cushioned and comfortable for that to ever occur naturally. We have too many expectations and entitlements, and some of them are even justified. So what then? The Stoics argued that if all we know is comfort, then we would be fragile and brittle when forced to inevitably experience pain or discomfort. By periodically practicing discomfort, we adapt and become stronger for those situations. We are able to understand that pain and discomfort are not things to be feared so much. This makes us emotionally more even-keeled. Growth only occurs to those who are able to mentally and physically withstand discomfort. Stoicism might be the first philosophy to preach the maxim of no pain, no gain. Stoics were not masochist or anti-pleasure. They still enjoyed the fruits of life, but they recognized that proper perspective is needed to be non-reactive and also appreciate the good things. Seneca puts it best. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" It is precisely in times of immunity from care that the soul should toughen itself beforehand for occasions of greater stress, and it is while fortune is kind that it should fortify itself against her violence. In days of peace, the soldier performs maneuvers, throws up earthworks with no enemy in sight, and wearies himself by gratuitous toil, in order that he may be equal to unavoidable toil. If you would not have a man flinch when the crisis comes, train him before it comes. To have a chance of keeping it together in the face of adversity, you must practice. Toughen up before you need to, and you'll be prepared for anything. Seneca suggested living as a pauper for a period of time. Wear old, unflattering clothes, eat sparsely and only plain food, and even attempt to sleep on the floor. There are various degrees to try this. You can go for a week with only simple food such as bread and soup. You can spend a month on a tight daily budget. Maybe you want to drink only water for a couple of days. Training your discomfort muscle makes you view hardship in a different light. Been there, done that. What's the big deal? This allows you to detach from the circumstances and move on more quickly. You'll gain the confidence in yourself that you can handle adversity and also appreciate what you have in a powerful way. These perspectives make it difficult to overly react to negative situations. Seneca reminds us, "It is precisely in times of immunity from care that the soul should toughen itself beforehand for occasions of greater stress. If you would not have a man flinch when the crisis comes, train him before it comes." Instead of putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, you can also purposefully say no to pleasurable situations. None of this makes life harder. In fact, it makes it easier. By undertaking acts of discomfort, you harden yourself against future misfortunes. If you only know comfort, then you might be traumatized when you're forced to experience pain or any other sort of discomfort in the future, as you surely will eventually. Optimally, you'll be immune to discomfort. Take away some comfort from your life, and it'll remind you of how comfortable and happy your life actually is. By purposefully foregoing some of our pleasures and comforts, we can create a greater sense of gratitude. Voluntary discomfort lets us enjoy more of what we already have, and maybe it takes away some of our cravings for more. Another way of training your non-reactivity and sense of gratitude is to practice negative visualization. Stoics recommended to periodically spend time imagining that we have lost the things we value most. Imagine you have lost your family, your health, or your job, whatever you place a high value upon. Deliberately reflect on each value as if it has disappeared. Think about what you would be missing and how that would impact your daily life. Think about the despair you would feel. Negative visualization is a powerful counter to human desire. Suddenly, you'll be forced to realize that you already have what makes you happy beyond measure. You'll realize and appreciate what you have in your life, and you will also find that the desire for more has completely halted. When you spend time deliberately realizing that everything you love and cherish could be taken from you tomorrow by some sick twist of fate, you'll feel humbled. You'll realize how many gifts and blessings you truly have. You'll see the real worth of everything surrounding you. This is a difficult state of mind in which to be consumed with desire and worry. Focusing on what you can control. Remember the first line of Epictetus's Enchiridion? Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. Some things are up to us, and some things are not up to us. This is deemed the Stoic circle of control. We must carefully distinguish between what is within our own power and what is not. Up to us are our voluntary choices, namely our actions and judgments, while everything else is not under our control. This means that right off the bat, you must accept that you have no control over 90% of your worries and concerns. No matter what you do or how virtuous you are, you cannot affect the outcome. So why keep your concerns dangling in your mind? We only control our actions and thoughts, and we have no choice but to accept the outcome. From our end, we can ensure that we are doing our best and putting our entire effort into something, but if we have done everything within our power, that's where our control really ends. The things that are up to you, your thoughts and your actions, are the most important things in life. The most appealing aspect of Stoicism is that we are responsible for our flourishing because all that truly matters in life is up to us. So, the key lesson to take away here is to focus our attention and efforts where we actually have control, and then let the universe take care of the rest. This turns out to be a very small subset of actions and thoughts, which is comforting in itself. Where a to-do list was once 10 items, you'll find that it can easily be shaved down to 3 items. The Stoics used the archer analogy to explain what to stop wasting your time on. An archer is trying to hit a target. He's done his best to prepare for this moment. He's practiced and trained, carefully selected his bow and arrow, and is in a state of intense mental focus. He can control each and every moment, right up until he looses the arrow. And then, whether or not he hits the target is not up to him. As the arrow takes flight, any number of things could happen, some predictable and some not. He could simply have not prepared very well and have poor aim, but a gust of wind could also disrupt the arrow's path. A bird could fly into the arrow's path, or the target itself could be jolted. Another person might also shoot the target first, or sabotage the archer. None of this reflects on the archer himself. He did his best, and left the rest to the flow of nature. This is all we can ever do, so the outcomes we get should be equally accepted. Amor fati. Epictetus went on to state, "So make a practice at once of saying to every strong impression, 'An impression is all you are,' not the source of the impression. Then test and assess it with your criteria, but one primarily. Ask, is this something that is or is not in my control? And if it's not one of the things that you can control, be ready with the reaction, then it's none of my concern." Check your impressions and ask yourself whether it's up to you or not. If it's up to you, then do something about it. If not, take it as it is. It was already written in stone before you got there, and it will be written in stone after you leave. Nothing you could have done would make a difference. Picture someone who prefers chocolate ice cream, but you serve them vanilla ice cream. You may have slaved over the vanilla ice cream, but that simply doesn't matter. It was never up to you, despite your efforts and planning. There's nothing left to do but move forward. Think of your day and think of the things you have complete control of, things you have some control of, and the things you have no control of. You should eventually come to the realization that the only thing you have complete control of is yourself. The only thing we control entirely is ourself, our will, and our intentions. You can't control if the sun will come up tomorrow. You can plan for it, but why worry about it? Focus on your own actions and improve them as you can. Give yourself the best opportunity for success and the outcome you want, but in the end, a hurricane could come and destroy everything, so why worry? Stoicism is a life philosophy that anticipates hardships. When good things happen to us, it's easy to feel strong and resilient, but it's only when we face hardship that we shape the narrative of our lives. Just like our emotions, the way we view our lives comes exclusively from us internally and doesn't really have any correlation with the reality that we live in. This has been 10-Minute Philosophy. From Buddhism to Stoicism, Confucius and Aristotle, bite-sized wisdom from some of history's greatest thinkers. Written by Patrick King, narrated by Russell Newton. Copyright 2019 by Patrick King. Production copyright by Patrick King.